Today's tutorial is a sample from Make Professional Painterly Game Art with Krita. This complete course will teach you how to make your own game sprites like a pro. It's available in 3 versions to fit your budget and your needs. You have a link on the screen, so check it out and enjoy the tutorial. There are a few principles of design we use to achieve clarity or harmony, to create appealing visuals. There is one that we have great control over as the game artist. It's contrast. Contrast is the obvious difference between 2 or more elements. It relates to other principles like emphasis, making something pop, repetition, or the lack of it, balance, etc. But we don't have full control over these, although they are visual in nature, because the level designer is the one who assembles the assets in the game ultimately. He will create the visual composition. That's why in the next 2 videos, we are going to focus on 3 types of contrast: value, color, and sharp against soft. 3 essential tools we use to help the player tell gameplay-related assets apart from the background and decorative sprites. Let's start with the value contrast, which is one of the most efficient tools to make a clear design or illustration. The value or lightness of a given color is how bright or dark it looks in context, relative to the brightest areas of what you are seeing. And I'm not talking about value in a color model on your screen or in your computer. I'm talking about the way you see colors. In life, your pupils dilate or narrow based on how much light your eyes receive, with a delay. That's one reason why we don't see how much light something emits, but rather how light it is compared to its environment. On top of that, when the brightness or the amount of light something emits doubles, it doesn't look twice as bright. So when we talk about value contrast, we are really talking about how big of a gap there is in terms of values between neighboring colors, and the computer will give us some tools to help us measure that. But let's cut on theory and look at the idea in practice. Just a warning before we look at how colors behave in an image editing program. On the computer, there are several ways to represent colors, and the words used to describe their characteristics can be confusing. For example, value and lightness are used by different color models and tools, but they don't work the same way. However, for us, as far as design is concerned, it's simple. Lightness equals value equals how bright or dark a color looks in context. You will understand what I mean in a second with this example. So we have a few colors, and as far as the program is concerned, they have the same lightness or value in the HSL color model. When I use the color picker, you can see that they are at the same position on the square, which represents the lightness on the vertical axis and the saturation on the horizontal axis. It is only their hue that's different. And yet, the 3 colors on the bottom left look lighter than the ones in the top right. And that is what we call value contrast. It is how light or dark colors look relative to one another and to surrounding colors. But it's not always easy to see, especially if you don't have too much experience with that. Thankfully, there are some tools we can use to convert our pictures or layers to grayscale. In Krita, I'll press Ctrl-Shift-U to call the desaturate filter. The shortcut should be the same in most image editing programs. By default, using the lightness mode, all of the colors look the same. The filter is taking the color, and it pulls the saturation down using the HSL color model. This is just like pulling the color down to the base of the triangle on the pop-up palette. That doesn't really help us because it doesn't correspond to the way we see things. If we use another method to desaturate the colors though, look at what happens. Back in the desaturate filter, both luminosity modes will give us a better sense of how light or dark the colors feel. And as you can see, the orange, the green, and the blue look lighter than the red, the pink, and the purple. So there are 2 key takeaways here. First, the hue of a color can affect how light it looks to us. That's very important, not just the lightness or value slider. Second, be wary of how the computer desaturates colors. Krita gives you control over the conversion, And that's nice, it's a paradigm that they have with the way they design the application, but it's not the case in most programs out there. Now you know what value contrast is and how to use a filter to better see your color's values. Let's see how it will help us make our sprites read better. And we'll use two games as an example for that. First, let's take Dust and Elysian Tale, as it uses a lot of soft colors, often sitting around 50% saturation. Because of that, the color contrast is low. In other words, the colors are a bit close to one another. And yet, the game works well. The player knows where the enemies are or where he's attacking. If we desaturate a screen capture of the footage, we can see some touches of bright and dark tones, close to pure white and pure black. The lightest values are found on the character, special effects, and on the UI, while you'll only see black in the background. In other words, the lightest tones are used on gameplay-related assets and the darkest ones in the environment. And this rule is consistent throughout the game. So this is one trick the author used to make that action-packed game read. And if we look at our second example, Pankapu, it's different. The colors are quite vibrant. So the artist had to use the value contrast at two different levels to help the player distinguish everything. First, in the characters themselves. They almost used the full value range, from black to white, like the single sprite does that. And then, there's a lot of contrast between the character, the monsters, the platforms, and the background. The characters are very dark overall, while the environment is either bright or not too contrasted. That way, the background just stays in the background and never clashes with gameplay assets. We just looked at two games that use value contrast in different ways. So you might be wondering how you take decisions regarding that in practice. Well, you don't do that beforehand. For example, in Pankapu, the authors probably painted the characters first, and they wanted them to be dark like that. Maybe to help the character feel like he's in an imaginary world or in somebody's dreams. And because of that, they had to use lighter tones for other assets. So the choices they made for the background was probably a consequence of the design decision they took for the character itself. And I want to stress out that the principles of design, like contrast, aren't simply rules you apply without thinking and before you start painting. Instead, they are tools you'll use continuously to make your art tell the story you want to tell and to make it look as appealing as possible. And in the next video, we'll expand our understanding of contrast with color contrast and sharp against soft. See you there.